Morning, everyone. Quebec is updating its cannabis laws. City TV News is reporting Quebecers under the age of 21 won't be able to legally buy or possess cannabis as of today. Isn't that interesting? December 31st, 2019. And, well, let's just go through some quick stats. The Quebec drinking age, the legal drinking age, is 18 years old. The age to buy cigarettes, 18 years old. The deaths attributed to cigarettes in Canada, 230,000 people per annual, yearly, okay? And the deaths attributed to alcohol, roughly, and this is according to the CCSA, is around 77,000 hospitalizations caused by alcohol. And I looked up deaths by cannabis, and it's complicated, but I'll get to that in just a minute. It's actually not that complicated. They're trying to make up stats, and they got caught. It's quite funny. They reported 8,851, but the study actually only reported 851, and the study was saying that it was car accidents and what was the other thing? Hold on. And lung cancer, car accidents and lung cancer. And the study was actually discredited to the point of it doesn't exist anymore. It's been removed. So, I mean, they're just trying to make up stats for cannabis deaths, but there are no overdose cannabis deaths. You can't overdose on cannabis. It doesn't kill you. There are no recorded deaths linked directly to cannabis in the same way that deaths are linked to cigarettes or hospitalizations are linked to drinking. So I find it interesting that Quebec is maintaining the age to buy cigarettes. 18 years old, you're an adult. Maintaining the drinking age. Hey, man, if you want to drink yourself to death, you go nuts, buddy. However, if you want to buy cannabis, you've got to be 21 years old in Quebec. I wonder why. I wonder what this... I mean, I think I know why, but there's a lot of money in tobacco, and I think that the tobacco industry was seeing their young early adopters fall off a cliff because cannabis is better on all fronts. But that's just my opinion. So, and I know there are people out there who don't like cannabis. Fine, we can disagree. But trading smoking a cigarette or alcohol for cannabis, I think, is an improvement just in the health. Period. Okay, back to this. iPolitics, this is a quick one. Are you ready to fund the CBC a bit more? Heritage Minister says Liberal government will boost local journalism. What they're going to do is they're going to send CBC into local newsrooms but boost CBC funding. Yay, more money to the CBC. Are you ready? Are you ready to have the CBC infiltrate your local news? Here's the main part of this. Now, I want to give you a preemptive... a little bit of preemptive information. Mark Carney spent 13 years working at Goldman Sachs. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. But this is a full court press to get the financial industries on side with this global warming stuff. This is happening. They're doing this. This is called manufacturing consent. They're moving ahead with this, whether you like it or not. And if you think things are expensive now, well, it's just getting started. Okay, here we go. BBC News is reporting Bank of England chief Mark Carney issues climate change warning. The world will face irreversible heating unless firms shift their priorities soon, the outgoing head of the Bank of England has told the BBC. Mark Carney said the financial sector has begun to curb investment in fossil fuels, but far too slowly. He said leading pension fund analysis, quote, is that if you add up the policies of all of the companies out there, they're consistently with warming of 3.7 to 3.8 degrees Celsius. The interview by presenter Mishal Hussain is one of several items on the program which are focusing on climate change on the day the show is guest edited by environmental campaigner Greta Thunberg. Mr. Carney added that the rise of almost 4 degrees Celsius was, quote, far above the 1.5 degrees that people say they want and governments are demanding. Okay, so again, this is manufactured consent, right? People say they want 1.5 degrees, so we're working hard to deliver what the people say they want. Actually, what's happened is the press has coordinated a story that if it's anything above 1.5 degrees, everybody's going to die. So the people say they don't want to die and therefore want us to keep below 1.5 degrees, right? And in threatening a rise of 4 degrees, well, that's like twice what the experts, quote unquote, are saying humanity can sustain. And I want to point out that latitude, and I used to say longitude, but I got it wrong. Latitude is a thing. the Yukon high in the summertime is 3 degrees Celsius. Toronto high in June, let's say June 30th, is 30 degrees Celsius. And India, Mumbai in June is warmer than that. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but those are rises of a lot more than 1 and 2 degrees. And if Toronto was 32 degrees in June, or the Yukon was 5 degrees in wherever, at whatever time they were, June, is that a huge problem? No. If you just go a couple of hundred miles south, you're going to hit a part where people are living and thriving in that temperature. So, and they're saying that sea rise is going to happen. Well, I mean, prove it. They can't at this point in time. And the Maldives are still not underwater. Check out Tony Heller's continual updates of the people fleeing in terror of the rising sea levels in the Maldives. Well, the Maldives are resort islands, okay? And people are not fleeing in terror. They're enjoying the beaches. And they're sitting there exactly where they were 30 years ago. And I'm going to show you a report from 30 years ago that says we should be much, much worse off than we are. But I'll get there. Back to the article. Scientists say the risks associated with an increase of 4 degrees Celsius include a 9-meter rise in sea levels, affecting up to 760 million people, searing heat waves and droughts and serious food supply problems. Mr. Carney, who will next year start his new role as United Nations special envoy for climate action and finance, continued, quote, "The concern is whether we will spend another decade doing worthy things but not enough, ... and we will blow through the 1.5 degrees Celsius mark very quickly. As a consequence, the climate will stabilize at a much higher level." Okay, hold on a second. The UN knows when the climate's going to stabilize? How do they know that? A higher level than what? How do they know? And I'll show you some stabilization talk from this 1989 article too. But stabilization, that implies that they know this system at all. And the reality is they don't. They don't. And they have no idea when it's going to stabilize. They have no control over this. Stabilize. What ridiculousness. Honestly, back to this. Speaking to the Today program, he reiterated his warnings that unless firms woke up to what he called the climate crisis, many of their assets would become worthless. Quote, "If we were to burn all of those oil and gas reserves, there's no way we would meet the carbon budget," he said. "Up to 80% of coal assets will be stranded and up to half of developed oil reserves. A question for every company, every financial institution, every asset manager, pension fund, or insurer: what's your plan?" 4 to 5 years ago, only leading institutions had begun to think about these issues and could report on them. Now, $120 trillion worth of balance sheets and bank assets managers are wanting this disclosure of investment in fossil fuels, but it's not moving fast enough. Climate campaigners, Extinction Rebellion. Now, question whether the capitalist system can halt climate change. I don't know why anybody's giving Extinction Rebellion any time of day at all, least of all the BBC. I mean, I know why they are, because they're on message, right? The Extinction Rebellion gets all sorts of views and they do stupid things, and like shutting down traffic in Edmonton, and other ridiculous things around the world, like the painting themselves and just being ridiculous, right? But putting them in newspapers gives them validates their movement or whatever, and it just reeks of NGO money. It just reeks of funding, right? It reeks of people being paid to be that vacant in the eyes while they're dancing around pretending to try and save the world. It's garbage. It's trash. It's ridiculous. So putting this in here just lost the BBC and the article credibility as far as I was concerned while reading it. I just wanted to mention that. Back to the article. Mr. Carney said capitalism had a vital role in raising funding for clean technologies, but he added that it had to be tempered by government-imposed incentives, rules, and prohibitions of the most damaging activities, like flying unless you're Justin Trudeau, or driving cars unless you're me, or whatever Mr. Carney says, right? Like, it's rules for thee, not for them. Rules for you and me, dear viewer, and not for the ruling class elite that get to fly around and go on their Costa Rican vacations. The carbon credits be, ignored. It is ridiculous. And it just smacks of hypocrisy, right? They sit there and claim that the world is ending, yet their actions betray the lie. Back to this. And capitalism. The attack on capitalism is insane. It's the best system we have yet devised, and it's not a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a far sight better than the gulags from the USSR and from Nazi Germany and from a whole bunch of other options that are around now. And there are other options around, but we should move to other options in a democratic way. The choice of the people, not in this, you have to give us all your money and all your production, and otherwise we're going to have 4 degrees warming and you're going to die, and your children are going to die too. It's hypocritical. It's ridiculous. It's the lie cannot sustain itself anymore. Too many people are waking up, and I'm done being nice about it. I'm done pretending that somebody who's telling me how the world's going to end in 10 years is telling me something that they truly believe. Because honestly, if you look at any of the real data points, it's not true. It's not true. It's just lies being parroted by the ruling elite, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the newspapers talking about it. I'm sick of it. But all of that said, the newspapers give the United Nations all of this room. They give Extinction Rebellion all of this room, all of this validation, and they say, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen this time. Definitely the end of the world this time in 10 years, for sure. 10 years from now, definitely. And for sure in 30. If not in 10, definitely 30. Bullshit. It's all bullshit. Back to this. Mr. Carney, capitalism, yes. Climate change was what he called, quote, a tragedy of the horizon because the decision-making time horizon of investment managers is between 2 and 10 years. Quote, in those horizons, there will be more extreme weather events. By the time that the extreme events become so prevalent and so obvious, it's too late to do anything about it, he said. We look to political leaders to start addressing future problems today. Yes, please look into your crystal ball and tax us more. If we could just give you more money and then you'd stop telling us we were going to die. That's not how politics works. I want people to have good policies that set the table for productive people to make hay of those good policies, those good business policies, those good trade policies. I don't want the government to hold our hand and start saying, you know what, in 10 years, these guys are right. Definitely the world's going to end. Give me all your money now. And let me buy a beach house. Martha's Vineyard. Ridiculous. Al Gore, Barack Obama. Yeah, it's hypocritical. The actions betray the lie. Back to this. He told those questioning the consensus on climate change, quote, we can't afford on this one to have selective information, spin, misdirection, ... It needs to be absolutely clear because we are all in on it. Yeah, sure. Quote, to deliver, there needs to be shared understanding about what's necessary, but it is reasonable for there to be debates at the margin about where does the role of the state stop and what is the role of markets. Mr. Carney applauded the UK government for hosting next year's vital global climate conference in Glasgow. He said success was vital. Yeah, I've heard that before. Under Mr. Carney's leadership, the Bank of England recently launched a stress test to determine which firms and sectors would be worst hit by climate change. The question is how fast financial institutions can change course. Recently, investment bank Goldman Sachs ruled out future finance for oil drilling or exploration in the Arctic. The bank said it would not invest in new thermal coal mines for power stations anywhere in the world. It also announced plans to help its clients manage climate impacts by selling weather-related catastrophe bonds. Really? Bonds? Okay. And who worked at Goldman Sachs for 13 years? Who traveled around the world at Goldman Sachs? Mr. Carney. Yeah, it smells, doesn't it? Doesn't it reek? And so that's the BBC article about it. I wanted to show you, and Global News says the impacts of climate change are effectively irreversible. Why are they taxing us? Why are they doing all this song and dance if it's irreversible? And here is the 1989 article that I was teasing earlier. And I want to mention, we're 30 years away from this article now, okay? A senior UN environmental official says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. Coastal flooding and crop failures would create an exodus of eco-refugees threatening political chaos, said Noel Brown, director of the New York office of the UN Environmental Program, or UNEP. It looks like they didn't need the echo. It's just refugees that are creating political chaos. They didn't need the echo. They just pushed it anyway. Ridiculous. He said governments have a 10-year window of opportunity from 1989 to 1999 to solve the greenhouse effect before it goes beyond human control. As the warming melts polar ice caps, ocean levels will rise up by up to 3 feet, enough to cover the Maldives and other flat island nations, Brown told the Associated Press in an interview on Wednesday. I'm going to go find a Maldives picture. Hold on. Here it is. When you get the joke, it's hilarious, right? Like here's Tony, and he says, this is 3 hours ago. He says, watching the climate panic in the Maldives is heartbreaking. This is the live cam from the Maldives, right? Yay, isn't that nice? And this has been an ongoing joke that Tony's been doing for a while. So like you can go back to, at least 12 hours ago. Is that 12 hours? November. I've seen a bunch of them through the months. November 3rd. So there you go. And look at that. Sea level rise. Boom. Those people look happy, don't they? Right? The Maldives is going to be underwater. My goodness. It's not. 30 years later, it's not. Back to the article. Quote, ecological refugees will become a major concern, and what's worse is you may find that people can move to drier ground, but the soils and natural resources may not support life. Africa doesn't have to worry about land, but would you want to live in the Sahara, he said. UNEP estimates that it would cost the United States at least $100 billion to protect its east coast alone. Shifting climate patterns would bring back the 1930s Dust Bowl conditions to Canada and the U.S. wetlands, and while the Soviet Union could reap bumper crops if it adapted its agriculture in time, according to a study by the UNEP and the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. Excess carbon dioxide is pouring into the atmosphere because of humanity's use of fossil fuels and burning rainforests. The study says the atmosphere is retaining more heat than it radiates, much like a greenhouse. The most conservative scientific estimate that the Earth's temperature will rise from 1 to 7 degrees in the next 30 years, said Brown. Brown said if the warming trend continues, quote, the question is, will we be able to reverse the process in time? We will say that within the next 10 years, given the present load that the atmosphere has to bear, we have an opportunity to start the stabilizing process. Does the UN know something that we don't about stabilizing the climate? Because they keep talking about it. 30 years ago, the other day, Mark Carney's walking in to stabilize the climate, but it's going to be higher. I think maybe they've got some levers. Back to the article. He said that even the most conservative scientists, quote, already tell us there's nothing we can do now to stop a ... change of about 3 degrees. Now, he didn't say all that. He said, already tell us there's nothing we can do now to stop ... change, end quote, of about 3 degrees. So the AP put that in. Associated Press put that in. Quote, anything beyond that, and we have to start thinking about the significant rise of sea levels, and we can expect more ferocious storms, hurricane, wind shear, dust erosion. He said there's time to act, but there's no time to waste. Haha, yes. Watch those rising sea levels 30 years from then, which don't exist. It's a lie. It's a scam. It's to get tax money and now investment money. And Goldman Sachs, do you want to buy some bonds? I've got some bonds to sell you, right? It's a scam. It's a scam. And it's unbelievable how out in the open they are about it, right? Even 30 years ago, doom and gloom and disaster. And fast forward, it's the same doom and gloom and disaster. Bold-faced lies. Look at this study. This study says it. CO2 is going to increase. We are carbon-based creatures. CO2 is tied to increased life. If the population increases, the CO2 will necessarily increase. It's simple. And when they untie the results of climate change, this is happening, to just reporting on CO2. CO2 is increasing. It's going to kill us all. Ah! That's the attempt. That's what they're doing, right? They cite reports to say, oh, well, the report said, and then the report gets debunked and doesn't exist on the internet anymore, right? And doesn't exist at all anymore, right? Debunked. So it's the same thing with the cannabis deaths, right? So it's interesting to note what's going on in our world. It's interesting to note that they're going to do this anyway. They're going to move forward with this, right? He's got Goldman Sachs hook, line, and sinker. They're going to sell bonds for catastrophe bonds. Do you want some catastrophe bonds? Don't forget climate change is happening. Blame those capitalist pigs. It's so unfortunate because the lessons of history are lost to the people who refuse to learn it. And we have a lot of modern history that shows exactly what we're going through yet again. And it seems no one's going to stop it. I don't think anybody could stop it. And I hope I'm wrong. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Happy New Year. Stay safe tonight. And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful, wonderful